Hi, I'm Ashley, and this is Crafty with Ashley. Today I am doing another watercolor painting using a printed out sketch, essentially. So it's kind of like doing a coloring book page here. And so I was able to just Photoshop a photo that I took while in Ireland and turn it into a coloring page, essentially, and then printed it out on watercolor paper. So I started with the background, the sky, and did just a wash of grayish blue color, and then splattered in just to get that loose effect with backgrounds and not looking for a nice smooth wash, and it just added some texture to the sky there. Then just mixing up some greens. So mixing in a little bit of pink or red with your green will kind of mute it and make it a more natural green color. So I did just a very light wash of that. And then wet in wet, I'm tapping in some darker colors to indicate where there's darker foliage. And this is kind of, the background is some fields that are separated by hedges. So mixing in or tapping in that darker color in lines to delineate where the hedges are. And then I just mixed up another batch of green that's slightly more vivid for the foreground, and then same thing, tapping in some darker color, and here it's to get the shadows underneath that portal tomb and where there would be shadow from the stones themselves, and then along where there was kind of a hill. So just tapping in that color and doing this all wet on wet or wet on damp so that it is bleeding out. Letting the background dry just slightly before tapping in more does help control the bleeds a little bit so they don't bleed out as far. And then going into this section, this is just kind of like a rocky area full of just kind of stones and rocks and a little bit of, drier grass in between. So just getting in that color and tapping in to get just a little texture in that first layer. So continuing, this is going to be very green heavy here. This is Ireland, which if you've ever been to Ireland or mostly even heard about Ireland, I think the fact that it's really green is one of the main things that's known about it. So going in and just getting all sorts of varieties of green, but using essentially the same mix of permanent rose, sap green, and Prussian blue to mix all of my greens to get it the cohesiveness of the piece here. And then for my stones, I'm using Payne's Gray, Burnt Umber, just a mix of different consistencies to get some more warmer grays and some more cooler grays to just add variety to the stone areas. And then for the stones of the portal tomb itself, same thing, just going in with essentially a mix of Payne's Gray and a little bit of Burnt Umber, and varying both the tone with, whether it's warmer or cooler, and the value, so how dark the color is. Essentially just starting with a light wash on the whole stone, but adding some darker values here and there to indicate where the shadows are. And this building in some of those shadows on the first layer helps to create that depth, and it helps you to be able to see as you continue which areas are needing to be darker and which ones you want to preserve the lightness of the paper. So again, just continue to build up these layers here, and I am painting wet on wet here, so everything on the paper is still nice and damp, and then tapping in the darker values and letting them bleed out so it's nice soft edges and not any hard distinct lines at this point in the painting. So I do have the reference photo for this that I am looking back and referring to, but essentially just kind of keeping in mind where where the light would be shining kind of through the tomb and from the right side, and casting those shadows off toward the left of the page. And so everything on that side is going to be a little bit more shadowed. So also the front of the stones are a little bit more shadowed because the sun is more from behind. And it's really important, if you're painting from either a reference photo from life or just from your imagination, that you kind of pick a point, pick a light source, which direction your light is coming from, and stay consistent with that. So your shadows are all going to be, going the same direction essentially, and that will help your image appear more convincing as a three-dimensional object versus just a two-dimensional rendering of that object. So I just continue to build up all of these layers of greens and grays, and trying to get texture and vary those values and colors a little bit to indicate that the land isn't all the way flat. And then I always use splatters for texture. I love splattering. It's my favorite technique, I'm pretty sure, for watercolor or any painting really. I love splattering. I think it just adds a looseness to it, and it helps you give up a little bit of the control. And that helps, for me at least, to then paint a little bit looser also, because I already have that kind of looseness of the splatters going. So I'm just going back in again, further defining where those hedges are that are separating the fields, and it's really starting to take more shape in the background. It's still not detailed, because the things that are farther back, typically you want to paint them with less detail to push them back into the background, but it does add interest at least. And so just going back in with more layers and kind of glazing on the rocks to add shadows and texture, using a little bit of dry brush technique, lifting to maintain highlights, and like I said, some glazing to just kind of warm up the color of some of the stones a little bit. And then just continuing to deepen up the darkest portions of the painting here. So I'd love to know if anybody else has kind of treated watercolor painting as a coloring book project. So whether you traced or like I did, printed out a sketch and then kind of filled it in loosely. Let me know in the comments if you've tried this technique or if it's something that you would want to try. I'd love to hear it. So again, now I'm going in with just more splatters because, again, I love splattering. I do find that my kind of stiffer brushes do better for the splattering in terms of, I guess, controlling what's not really controllable, but slightly more controllable, just because they don't hold quite as much water. So if you use a brush that holds a lot of water, you're going to get much larger splatters. So if that's what you're going for, do it. But if you're going for those kind of smaller splatters with less water, use a stiffer brush. So just kind of cleaning up some of these sections here and lifting, and that is it. So I really hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a like, check out some other content on my channel, and have an awesome day. Thanks for watching.